Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope you're having a great day. And Daniel Jeremiah dropped his mock draft 2.0, so figured let's check it out. So, with no further ado, let's get into it. And starting off with the first overall pick, the Raiders taking Fernando Mendoza. It's the um, it's the clear and obvious pick. You know, everybody's going to have this pick because it's basically kind of locked in. Like. Like unless the Raiders, which I've seen some people throw out there that they should trade it, but I don't think they should. Like, yes, people are saying next year's class will be better, but we said that last year about the 26 class. Like, you never actually know what quarterbacks are going to be available and also where you're going to be picking. And if you have the opportunity to take a quarterback first overall or wherever you're picking in the first round, if that guy is available for you to take, go ahead and take him. Like, there's no reason not to draft that guy. This pick is kind of locked in. Like last year, it was kind of a debate of whether Tennessee should go, Cam Ward, or Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. They actually went Ward, but last year was more of a debate. This year, it's kind of locked in. Mendoza will be the top pick. And yes, the Raiders could trade out and a team like the Jets or the Browns or some other desperate team, in the top 10 might say, oh, we want to trade up and get Mendoza because we think he's our guy. Like, one, you don't know how good the class is going to be next year, and you don't know where you're going to be picking. Like, if you're picking number one overall and you can draft a quarterback, do it. Don't trade back unless you're like unless you're certain, oh, this guy isn't better than the guy we had. And Mendoza's better than any quarterback on the Raiders roster. So moving on to number two with David Bailey to the Jets. This is a very interesting pick. Um, as DJ says, the Jets have their pick of the draft's finest edge rusher in Bailey. Yeah, I mean it's true. I mean, if you want to go just pure edge rusher and like probably the best talent wise right now, Bailey's that guy because Bain, has more potential, but Bailey showed it this past year, and then Reese is more of a question mark of whether or not he would be a full time edge rusher or if you have to keep him at linebacker and edge. If the Jets just want to go purely edge rusher, and I mean, if they do go Bailey or Bain, that could open up the possibility of seeing like Jermaine Johnson getting traded away or Will McDonald because the current regime obviously didn't draft either of those two guys. And if you're gonna draft one of these guys, maybe one of those guys ends up coming up on the market. I think the Jets, out of Bailey, Bain, or Reese, I think it comes down to one of those three guys. I know I've said, and other people have said, they could go with one of the wide receivers, but I think that's more so at a 16th overall pick. Like I think you go with the best, defender, whichever they think is the best defender of this class, of the three edge rusher, Reese, Bailey, and Bain. And then at 16, one of those top guys falls, whether it's a receiver or a corner, maybe you go defensive tackle, whatever, you could go there. But I think Bailey could make the most sense if the Jets just want to go with the best pure pass rusher right now over a guy with Bane who has the potential but hasn't really shown it, and a guy like Reese who might not end up being a full time edge. Number three overall, the Cardinals, Francis Mauigoa. Yeah, I mean, he's a plug and play right tackle, which the Cardinals need. And, you know, it seems like the perfect pick. Like, yes, they could go with one of the top defenders, which remember a couple of years ago they traded off from Will Anderson to get the Texans first round pick, which was valuable until Houston made the playoffs that year. So they could go with one of those guys. They could go. I've seen Jeremiah Love at third overall. Maui Noah, Rafano, whichever tackle the Cardinals think is the top one, go with. Because I get these guys aren't like top five players in the class, but in a class where there's not much talent at the top, it's kind of like last year's class where it's like there's not many elite players. There's a lot of good players, but there's not many elite guys. We could just see the Cardinals say, why don't we fortify our tackles, make this offensive line better? They're more than definitely going to move on from Kyler Murray. It seems like it, whether it's a trade or a release. Um, but you can fortify those tackle positions with Paris Johnson and now Maui Noah or Fon. And you're able to just have those foundational pieces for whoever that quarterback is in the future, whether it's a guy you bring in this off season that has this great year and you sign to an extension, whether it's a rookie from this year class, next year, or whenever. Or maybe they trade for a guy like Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. Um, but I think going tackle makes the most sense for the Cardinals. But hey, if you want to go Jeremiah Love, because James Conner could end up getting cut, and although they drafted Trey Benson, Love is obviously better, and Benson's not going to stop you from taking him. I feel like tackle makes more sense because you'd rather fortify the offensive line and then try to bring in a running back instead of drafting that running back and then trying to like later on draft offensive linemen. Moving on to four with Ruben Bain, yeah. I feel like in my opinion, Bain should be at least a top, probably at least top four selection in my opinion. Right now, I think he's probably around like my third, fourth best player. So, and I think I would take him ahead of Bailey and Reese. Even though a lot of people have Reese or Bailey ahead of him because of his smaller arms and because while he had some great moments this season, he wasn't like fully impacted throughout the entire year. Anyway, Bain can be Bain can be, Robert Saleh's Nick Bosa. And it gives that defensive line a nice um because you have Jeffrey Simmons, you have the guy from UCLA, I think it's Femi or Olufemi Oladipo. Um, so like you have those two guys. Simmons obviously proven commodity, and then Oladipo has some potential. If you have him and Bain on the edges, you have Simmons up front. It gives you a really good defensive line for this Robert Saleh defense to be much better. Look, I feel like it makes sense for Saleh to get his Nick Bosa for this Titans defense. We usually see a lot of times when coordinators get hired to be coaches, they usually try to, especially if they're calling plays, they usually try to find their version of that guy. Like Mike McDonald found Nicky Imamori to be his Kyle Hamilton. Byron Murphy is his Madubuike. Like you usually see coordinators try to get, their version of that guy. And Bain could end up being Robert Saleh's Nick Bosa and give this defense another elite defensive lineman to really help out a defense that has not been that great in the last couple of years. We're on to 5 with the Giants. Cardinals 8. I mean, it makes sense for so many reasons. Wan'Dale Robinson is a free agent. Obviously, Neighbors is going to be back off that torn ACL. So Tate, you know, like if you draft a wide receiver at 5, it does give Neighbors kind of that breathing room to get back to adjusting off the torn ACL. And it gives Jackson Dart another weapon. It gives this offense a true, game changer alongside Neighbors. And, it gives this Giants offense what they haven't had in a while, probably since maybe OBJ and Victor Cruz, I want to say. But they haven't had that great of a wide receiver dynamic in probably 10 years, I want to say, around that. So I think this would be a phenomenal pick, and it would give the Giants 2 dynamic playmakers on the outside for Jackson Dart to be able to throw to. I mean, kind of the reason why a lot of quarterbacks grow after their first couple of years and will struggle after the first couple of years because the team doesn't invest in helping them out on the offensive side. And if you give Dart another weapon who can be there for the long haul, at least you'd have him for 5 years with Dart and Tate, helping Neighbors. That gives you a foundation to build off of for the future. Moving on the Browns with Spencer Fontenot. I mean, if one of the tackles is available, I think the Browns are sprinting to the podium to select them because their offensive line has been horrible the last couple of years. Now, maybe that's due to Bill Callahan leaving for Tennessee, but they have a lot of older guys who are either going to be free agents, could retire, and they need to get younger on that line. And Fano could give this Browns offensive line another young piece that hopefully will stay healthy and give whoever the quarterback is this year and for the future a long-term guy on the right side to fortify this offensive line and make it better than what it has been the last couple of years. Going on a 7 with Reese. Yeah, I mean, I think Washington, like if one of Bailey, Kane, or Reese falls to them, you just sprint to the board and take them. I got Caleb Downs, the safety, being like probably arguably the best player in this class. But safety is not as valuable as other positions. But if I'm Washington, I'm just taking um, the best. If one of those guys is available at 7, which I think one of them should be, I think you go ahead and take one of them and give this defense a building block because they overachieved in 2024 and Adam Peters I think thought they were better than they were, which usually happens with these teams that exceed expectations. They think they're better than like the team exceeds expectations and everybody's like, oh, they're a lot better than we thought they were, and then the GM doesn't make the necessary moves to really have this team continue to compete. I think the big issue for Washington is getting in on defense. And not just younger, but also elite players. And Reese, who's arguably the best player up there with his teammate Caleb Downs as the best player in this class, could give this Washington defense an elite player for hopefully the next decade plus. Moving on to the Saints with Mekhi Lemon, yeah. I mean, I think if one of the receivers is available, which I think they should be, because unless Tennessee or the Jets, like one of those teams in the top 5 selects one, more than likely at least 2 of those guys will be available at 8, and Lemon phenomenal piece. You pair him alongside Chris Olave. You have Jawan Johnson. It gives Tyler Shuck some weapons. And the Saints are one of those teams where like they have a young quarterback, but the offensive line really isn't that big of an issue because they've invested into it with so many high picks with Fuaga, Banks, Cesar Ruiz. I know Trevor Penning's a free agent, but like they've invested in it with a lot of talent on the offensive side where it's like they can take a skill position player, whether it's one of the wide receiver, whether it's Love. I think it'd be a perfect fit and give Shuck just another dynamic playmaker because later on when Olave was out with injuries, they didn't have really anybody else in that wide receiver room that could do anything else. So I think the Saints, one of their bigger priorities should be to address that wide receiver two position, and Lemon would be the perfect fit for this offense to give Tyler Shuck another weapon outside. Moving on to 9 with Jeremiah Love to the Chiefs. And look, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, why would the Chiefs go Jeremiah Love when they can go inside ETN, Brees Hall, or, and bring in one of those guys? Well, one, Love is going to be under a rookie contract. And the Chiefs, a team that is contending year in and year out, needs good production on cheap contracts, especially when they're paying guys like Mahomes, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Nick Bolton. They're eventually, if they do pay Trent McDuffie or if they trade him, he's going to be a big, like, they're paying a lot of their top guys. And Love can give you better talent than Hall and ETN. But he's on a cheaper contract. He's not going to be making as much as those guys, if they hit free agency. And it also gives this Chiefs offense, a dynamic playmaker in the backfield they haven't had since like early Kareem Hunt. And it can give this offense, a difference maker to where when Mahomes comes back, he's not going to have to reliably have to throw for like 500, 400, 500 yards a game for this team to win. He's going to be able to hand it off to Jeremiah Love, and he can get like 20, 25 carries a game and be able to help this Chiefs offense out to get it back to how great it was early on in the Mahomes era. And number 10 with the Bengals, yeah, I think they just should go best defensive player available. If one of the tackles falls to you, then maybe you go with them or you could put them in at guard, but I feel like they should just go best defensive player. Like that defense is horrible. Like we saw last year, even with Joe Flacco, like that offense can put up points, but the defense is horrible and giving up so many points that like it's impossible. And Downs gives Al Golden a Swiss Army knife. It gives him, this elite playmaking safety where you can move him around, put him in so many different spots, and he can be able to make plays and give the Cincinnati defense an elite defensive back they haven't had since Jesse Bates when he left for Atlanta. And in my opinion, you just go best defensive player available, and you just say we need to get better on defense. Whether they keep Trey Henderson or not, you're still going to need other defensive players. And Caleb Downs or whoever they pick at 10, is really going to help this defensive out. 11 with the Dolphins, yeah. If the top two corners are on the board, I think you need to go corner. I know, they just recently released Tyreek Hill, and that was always seemingly going to happen. It never felt like he was going to stay in Miami. Who knows where he ends up, um, whether he's playing in 2026 or whether he maybe pulls an OBJ and takes a year off, comes back in 2027. Who knows? But yeah, if the top two corners are on the board, you got to go with either one, Delane or McCoy. Um, because that cornerback room has been atrocious, especially like when you trade away Jalen Ramsey, who was declining as a player, but still the best corner they had in that room. And then you're signing guys, you know, late into the off season, and you're relying on these young guys like Kader Kohu. Like they need to improve in that position, and they're not going to have a lot of money because of all these contracts that they're um, releasing, and who knows what happens with Tua. But you need to get young developmental guys, and whether it's Delane, whether it's McCoy, you got to go with that top corner to really emphasize. Um, you need to improve on this defense. Moving on to 12, with the Cowboys going Jerron McCoy, and yeah, I mean they also need corner help. They obviously released Trayvon Diggs during the season, which was kind of a shocking move, just because you thought they would have waited until the offseason, but clearly they just wanted to move on from him. And they have young guys like Deron Bland, who is on a big contract, but hasn't really lived up to it since his breakout year in 2023. Obviously, you got Revel, who could be, you know, he could be eventually a good player, but McCoy can give this defense an elite shutdown corner they haven't had since, I don't really know. Because, like, Diggs was more of a ball hawk. He really wasn't, a shutdown sort of guy where it's like nobody's throwing his way. Um, so McCoy can give you that, and I mean he could go a lot higher than that. If he is impressive at the combine, where he, is unbelievable, looking like the best corner, and look fully healthy, then he can skyrocket his draft stock and be the top guy. That's the only reason why he's not going as high as he probably would have if he played in 2025. And a Dallas defense that, with their two first round picks, you got to just go best defensive player. Like, that's how I just see it. Like, you go best defensive. Them and the Bengals are two teams where it's like you just go best defensive player, at least in the first round, because you need to address these bad defenses if you want to be back competing for the Super Bowl. Another 13 with the Rams going Emmanuel McNeil Warren, which this is the highest I've seen him go, but I mean he's another guy who could test off the charts and go a lot higher. And yeah, I mean the Rams have some good safeties. Cam Kitchens was a phenomenal find back in 2024. And you have Quint Lake, Cam Curl's a free agent, but I mean we saw when Lake got injured that defense really started to fall apart. And, you know, who knows how much longer Quint Lake could be a Ram. I mean, you go with EMW, and he could really give this secondary another great chess piece for Crystal to have. And, say Lake goes down, say Kitchens goes down, maybe if that bring back Curl, say he goes down. You need another guy on that back end, and EMW could really give this Rams defense another elite young player to really fortify a defense, which is really good, but showed its flaws late into the season. And another piece would be amazing. Moving on to the Ravens. Um, go with Jordan Tyson. And hey, I would love this as a Ravens fan. I have been clamoring for the Ravens to bring in another wide receiver. Zay Flowers is good, and he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. The best, probably, Ravens drafted receiver of all time because they have had a bad history. So, and I would love this. I mean, Tyson's my number one receiver. Now, he could fall due to plenty of injuries, like torn ACL, broken collarbone. Like, he's at a list of injuries that could end up leading him to falling down the board. And I wouldn't hate the idea of Jordan Tyson and Zay Flowers, as two dynamic playmakers, just especially Rashad Bateman, who had a breakout year in 2024, but then declined in 2025. The Ravens, like, they need another playmaker for Lamar. Because you have Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews is decent. I don't really understand why they paid him over Likely when it was clear Likely was he was becoming the top tight end for the team. Um, but outside of Flowers, there's not really much else for Lamar to reliably go on, especially if Likely leaves. Tyson would be a great fit for this Ravens offense and give Declan Doyle another chess piece out there to make defenses fair. Because for years, the Ravens haven't been great, like at developing receivers and bringing in top tier talent at the receiver position to where people know that they're a run based team, that they're going to run it a lot, and it's easy to stop them. But when you have dynamic playmakers like Flowers and Tyson, it really gives this Ravens offense something unique that they haven't had in probably since Anquan Boldin and Torrey Smith in like the early 2010s. We're on to 15 with the Bucks. Yeah, Sonny Styles, if he falls to Tampa, would be an amazing pick because, like, Lavonte David, as good as he is clearly not the same player he once was, and they have neglected really improving this linebacker core and the edge rushers, even the secondary, for a while because they just kind of said, "Hey, we have a defensive-minded coach. He'll be able to coach up whoever it is." But they need to improve plenty on that defense if they want to get back to possibly contending. And Styles would give this Tampa Bay defense, their next Lavonte David potentially, and really be able to help out this defense for the long term because they've kind of neglected bringing in a linebacker, bringing in more edge help in the secondary. They kind of just relied on veteran guys and their own players, and eventually that's not going to work out. And a Bucks team that needs to get better and younger on the defensive side, Styles would be a phenomenal fit. We're out of the Jets um, at 16, and I mean, this would be a phenomenal fit with Viveka Iwane. Yeah, both AVT and John Simpson are free agents. And AVT's been banged up plenty during his rookie contract. So, I mean, if he's available at 16, I think it'd be a phenomenal pick because they have the tackles and Armand Membu and Olu Fashanu. Yeah, and a young center, and I think Joe Tippmann, I want to say, is the center, right? Not 100% sure, but the guards, you know, if they are able to bring back Simpson, I think he'd be the more coveted guy just because AVT, not a guy who this regime drafted, and also is coming off a serious injury where he missed the entire 2025 season. Even if you bring back Simpson, you need a another guard, and Vega Wane could fit in perfectly and give him another long-term piece on that offensive line to where whoever that quarterback is in 26 and in the future, they could have a good structured offensive line that have weapons on the outside and really give this Jets offense a boost to where whenever they get that quarterback, whether it's through the draft, whether it's in free agency, that guy will be protected and will be able to, make plays. Yeah. Went on to 17 with the Lions going TJ Parker. And I mean, I would love this pick. I've been waiting for the Lions to address that second edge because ever since they drafted Hutchinson, they really haven't addressed that second edge rusher. But they've kind of relied on guys like James Houston, Marcus Davenport, and others. But you need to actually bring in young talent and be able to, develop these guys. And Parker, who has the talent, has the potential to be maybe the best edge rusher of this class. I know it's crazy saying that when you have guys like Bailey, Bain, Reese, and others. Um, but I think he could be the best guy, and he would give this Lions defense another, great defensive lineman to get after the quarterback and give Aiden Hutchinson some help because, you see a lot of times when guys have elite edge rushers, they usually get, double teamed or even triple teamed sometimes. And then the other guys just aren't able to help them out. Like, look at what the Steelers have done. They have TJ Watt, but you bring in guys like Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, to really help out TJ Watt so that he's able to still get after the quarterback. Parker would be able to help out Aiden Hutchinson and give this defense another dynamic defensive lineman. 18 for the Vikings going Dylan Thieneman. I mean, I've seen a lot of people have more than one safety, which clearly that means that Thieneman and EMW are clearly first round type safeties. And this could be the first year in a while we see like multiple safeties go. Because usually we've seen like, the Malachi Starks or I'm trying to think of other, or like Jamal Adams, um, Kyle Hamilton. Usually you see like these top tier safeties, and then the rest of the class is like day two, day three picks. We could see multiple guys if it ends up being that way going in the first round. And Thieneman could be a phenomenal fit, especially Harrison Smith getting up there in age. Will he retire? Will he come back? Even if he does come back, you still need a long term plan, and another defensive back in that backfield would give this defense great guy for Brian Flores to be able to use. Went on to 19 with Keldrick Falk to the Panthers. Yeah, the defense was amazing, or not amazing, but it was a lot better with a healthy Derek Brown, with the improvements, with the young guys, like Nick Scorton and Lathan Ransom. They were able to pretty much, um, make this defense a lot better. And you add Falk, who can be another dynamic defensive lineman for a defense that, has started to get better now that they have more talent there, and a defense that could even make another jump in 2026. And if the offense continues to make their jumps, you can see the Panthers, being a lot better and even maybe competing to get like a top maybe 3 seed in the NFC when it's all said and done. We're on a 20 with the Cowboys. I mean, Akeem Mesidor is an older prospect. That he's going to be 25 when the season starts. Most teams will look at that and say, well, that guy's older. Should we really invest a first round pick when he's going to be 30 by the end of his rookie contract? But I mean, I could see him going to the Cowboys, see him going, in the 20s to a team that, needs edge rushing help, but also is contending. A team trying to push for the playoffs. Like, I don't want to see a team draft him that's like, yeah, like a team that's like, I don't know what the word is, but like a team that's like not really going to compete for another couple of years, and then he's kind of, wasted talent. Like you see a lot in the NBA where like teams that like are going to try and win the finals should probably go with like older prospects who can make differences. And I think Messidor could go to a team like the Cowboys, maybe like the Niners, the Patriots, maybe the Broncos. A team that like is trying to compete to make the playoffs and even make the Super Bowl and could use a guy who could immediately come in and make a difference like Messidor. We're on the 21 with the Steelers going Denzel Boston. Yeah. I mean, I think, you could say Ty Simpson. I think this would be a little too high for him. But I think wide receiver should be a big need for the Steelers and draft whoever the top receiver is available. Because you have DK who's making a lot of money, and I'm going to be making a video next week about last offseason moves and giving my grades 1 year later. So you see that. But yeah, you have Metcalf, who maybe under Mike McCarthy, a new system will be better. But outside of that, you got like Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson. You're not very good players. They need another dynamic wide receiver out there for whoever the quarterback is for this season and for the long term. And Boston could give this Steelers team another great receiver that can be relied upon in this offense. We're on the 22 with the Chargers going Kenny Sadiq. Wow. This is an interesting pick. I get with Vega Wane off the board, maybe not wanting to go with like a Caden Proctor or one of those guys who you can move into guard. So I understand it, but really, Sadiq, I mean, they drafted Gadsden last year, who was much better than his fifth round pick made it seem he was. So it is an interesting, but at the same time, maybe they view Sadiq as another wide receiver, just in a tight end's body, kind of like Kyle Pitts and some of these other tight end prospects we've seen recently. So maybe they want to use him more as like a wide receiver and not a true tight end. And Ganson's going to still be that, but this is an interesting pick because the Chargers, I feel like, have bigger issues than getting another weapon. Like this is kind of like what Tom Telesco would do when he was a GM. Like he would just go with like a wide receiver or like a skill position player when they probably need to invest into the offensive line, into like other issues that the team has to try to push for making it farther into the playoffs under Harbaugh. Went on to 23 with the Eagles. Blake Miller. And yeah, I mean, Lane Johnson, who knows how much longer he can be playing, especially without banged up he was this year. And look, Jordan Mailata, obviously a great left tackle. Landon Dickerson is great. Cam Jurgen is decent. Tyler Steen's not that great, and then Lane Johnson on the right side. But Philly's kind of always had elite offensive line play because of Jeff Stoutland, who left the team. So it'll be interesting to see how his offensive line looks without him. But yeah, Johnson, you know, whether he returns in 2026 or not, he's, banged up the last couple of years. And, you know, you need a guy like Blake Miller who can be able to go out there and actually help this offensive line stay, consistently good. Because, like, the backups are not that great, especially at the tackle position. And if Johnson goes down, even if Jordan Mailata goes down, maybe you can have Blake Miller be put into that spot and be able to help this offensive line out stay playing really well. We're on the 24 with the Browns. Wow. So we had them going Spencer Fano at 6 and then Mono Freeling at 24, which is interesting to go two tackles um in the same draft, but maybe he just, you know, very much concerned with DeJuan Jones' health, and maybe just wants to give another body out there. Now, it is interesting to like go with a tackle when like you already have at least five starters. You're kind of drafting him to be like a potential replacement with Lane Johnson or a backup who, if a guy gets injured, can be in there. So it is a little interesting for the Browns, but hey, I mean, DeJuan Jones obviously has had a health, um, spotty injury history since he got into the NFL, and maybe the Browns just aren't so reliant on him, and they'd rather just go two tackles at 6 and 24, and hopefully have two long-term pieces in Freeling and Fano or whoever they would take. But it is an interesting thing to think about if the Browns would go two tackles because I've always perceived they'd go either tackle or wide receiver at 6 and then the other one at 24. But maybe they just want to fortify this offensive line and make sure that whoever the starting quarterback is protected. We're on 25 with the Bears going Peter Woods. I mean, yeah. I mean, they they need to get help on that defensive line. Yeah, Montez Sweat, who while is good, is it that elite edge rusher, and they have other guys. Dio Dengbo, I think, was injured most of the years. Who knows what he looks like? They have Gervon Dexter, who has some potential, but I mean Woods, he could end up being the top defensive tackle when it's all said and done. Like I know some people like Caleb Banks or Kenny McDonald, even Lee Hunter, but I think Woods, just like his teammate TJ Parker, could, in 5 years be the one of the best or top five, top 10 players of this class because they have that potential. It's just it, they didn't have that great of a season, and sometimes that happens to elite players where they just don't have great seasons, but they're still great players. And this would be a great move for the Bears to get a young, inside piece alongside Dexter, um, and really give this Bears defensive line another big time player um, to help it out because that defense was reliant on turnovers last year. They're not going to be able to get those bounces, so you need to improve this defense so that they're not as vulnerable as they were last year. Went out of 26 with the Bills going Malachi Fields. I mean, I had this in my last mock draft um, last week after the Super Bowl, so I think it'd be a phenomenal fit. I mean, he's probably going to be the best receiver out of all the guys at the Senior Bowl. He's going to probably be the highest drafted. And a Bills offense that you have Khalil Shakir, who's a slot guy, but who do you have outside of that? Keon Coleman clearly is not a long-term piece, especially with what the owner said, and they've they've signed guys like Curtis Samuel, Josh Palmer, Elijah Moore. Those guys aren't long-term pieces. They need to get another dynamic playmaker down the field at the wide receiver position, and Fields could give you that and really give this Bills offense another layer to this offense so that they'd be able to keep up with some of the high powered offenses in the AFC. Moving on to 27 with the Niners going Lee Hunter, which this is an interesting pick, but I don't hate it. I mean, Hunter could end up being the number one D tackle off the board, depending on how things work out. And the Niners defense that was banged up last year with their top two guys going off and leaving. And then, having a lot of young guys on that defensive side really show out. But you plug in another piece on that defensive line to really help it out. And I mean, it could be a phenomenal fit. I mean, I would consider going wide receiver, especially if Brandon Ayuk will be off this team. Jawan Jennings seemingly will be also. He's a free agent. So I was thinking about maybe bringing in another wide receiver. But hey, if you want to go improving that defense, I wouldn't hate it. Moving on to 28 with the Texans going Caleb Williams. And yeah, Williams would be a phenomenal pick for this Texans defense. I'm surprised he didn't have the Niners going offensive line because that's been a big issue because they've kind of always relied on Trent Williams at left tackle and then four other not big name guys, but are just great in that system. But yeah, Arian Theory seems to be hopefully the long-term left tackle after the team moved on from Larry Tunsil and drafted him out of Minnesota. And he could be Williams could be that long-term right tackle. I saw some reports that CJ Stroud could be on the move, which I think is a little crazy in my opinion, because yes, Stroud was not that great in the playoffs, but it wasn't just him. It was also the offensive line being very much like one of the worst in the league. And Stroud is just like the last 2 years since his rookie year, he's kind of just anticipated that he's going to be under pressure and just tries to make plays instead of relying on his offensive linemen because for the most part they haven't really done a great job of protecting him. So Houston needs to invest into this offensive line. And look, I think if they invest into this offensive line and it's better in 2026, Stroud could, get back to his rookie form. Like he still has had, 3 great seasons despite, the not so great playoff performances. And let's not forget Stroud is not a guy who rarely his 2 playoff performances were kind of outliers compared to the way Stroud has usually played. He rarely turns the ball over. And I think in 2026, with a much improved offensive line and healthy skill players, Stroud will look better and he'll earn that contract that he will deserve next offseason. Went out to 29 with the Rams going Colt Hood. Yeah, I mean, corner could be in play at 13, though DJ has the top 2 guys going off the board. So I understand going with a different position, but yeah, I mean, they've kind of been reliant on, these guys they've drafted later in the round, like Kobe Durant and others, or bringing guys like Emmanuel Forbes off waivers. So they've, not really had the greatest cornerbacks since trading away Jalen Ramsey, even though the defense has still been really good. And Hood could give this defense another defensive back player for Chris Shula to use. And look, what you saw in 2025 without, Jermon McCoy, Hood was still a really good corner and showed he can be a CB1. So maybe LA is able to land him later in the first round, and he can be a um big time guy for the Rams in the future, alongside McNeil Warren, Cam Kitchens, and you kind of have that young defensive back starting to fail alongside with the young front seven that they have. We're on the 30 with the Broncos going to CJ Allen. Yeah, I mean, Trey Greenlaw, they signed, but he is always injured, and you don't know when he's going to be on the field. Especially he got injured at the beginning of the year, and then he eventually got back. And then Alex Singleton, who DJ says is a free agent. So CJ Allen, the next you know great Georgia linebacker, can pencil in and give this defense another push. Sometimes to have your team be great, you just gotta improve some of those weaknesses on your great unit. So that way it's a fortified unit, and CJ Allen could be the perfect fit. But on a 31 with the Patriots going Zion Young, a guy who um am a huge fan of, and I want to get him into a mock draft. Hopefully post combine I'll be able to get him into one in the first round. And I mean, he's a guy who, because there's not many edge rushers in this class outside of like the top tier guys who really are true 3 down players. Like a lot of guys are DPR, which is designated pass rushers, like guys like R. Mason Thomas, but like Cassius Howell, like these guys aren't great 3 down players. Young is one of those 3 down players who could end up going in the first round, because NFL teams, value 3 down players. They value guys who can, not just be great pass rushers on first and second down, but be able to be great on third down against the run and be 3 down true players instead of just true just pass rushers. And the Patriots team that more than likely will lose Caleb on Chason after he had a breakout season. Maybe showing that he just needed to be in the right team, right scenery. But Young can be that replacement alongside Harold Landry and keep this defensive line, really good for the Pats that are trying to continue to have success and not just be a one hit wonder the way the Bengals have kind of been since their Super Bowl run. Then finally, the Seattle Seahawks going Casey Concepcion, which is very interesting. Now, Rashid Shaheed is a free agent, and Seattle has a lot of free agents for a Super Bowl winning team. It's kind of like the Eagles, um, last year or maybe 2022, or one of those years. It was 2022 Philly, where like they had like so many free agents and they lost a lot of talent and kind of had to regroup after that. Seattle could go wide receiver if Shaheed enters free agency and does leave to another team. You have JSN, you have Cooper Kupp, but Casey Concepcion can be that big play threat down the field and give the Seattle offense another dynamic playmaker for Sam Darnold. But yeah, that is Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft 2.0. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I'll catch you guys in my next video. But until then, hope you guys have a great day, and bye.